mystery surrounding our ship still haunts us.
So the show that I thought I wasn't going to care about, I'm now looking forward to every week. I'm of course talking about Star Trek Prodigy, and I'm going to be talking about this week's episode, First Contact. As always, I'm Al, this is the Geek in Review, so let's get to it. Now, this will contain spoilers, so if you haven't seen the episode, this is your only warning. Still reeling from the revelation last week about, well, the previous crew, or at least Chakotay, because we didn't really see anyone else, and what might be the history of the protostar. And yeah, man, I know exactly how they feel, because we are getting answers slowly every week, but we're also getting more questions, and there's a few of those in this episode as well. And the crew isn't the only one that's having to wrestle with these questions. Janeway herself is trying to come to terms with not knowing what she doesn't know, because it seems that she doesn't remember a whole lot. Now, they haven't really done much with the Janeway hologram at the moment, but I've got a theory on this. So if you remember when the Doctor was initially activated in Voyager, he was a bit like the way that Janeway is now, but he evolved over time, and that was through having interactions with the crew. So I think that Janeway is at least capable of more, or I think she might be more intelligent than she's letting on, or a bit more sentient than she's letting on, because she does appear to be just a sort of 24th or 25th century Google assistant at the moment. She's not giving us any answers. The crew are just finding out for themselves. So I think there is more to her than we're seeing. But anyway, back to the episode. In the ship, and they've discovered the transporter. And this does raise some interesting questions, as well as none of them seem to know what the transporter is, including Jankin Pog. And again, we know that he's an Alpha Quadrant species that ended up in the Delta Quadrant, so this backs up the theory that he's never been the Alpha Quadrant, because in the Delta Quadrant, or at least some of the sections that Voyager was in, transporter technology hadn't been developed yet, neither had replicator technology and a few other things as well. But they don't really seem to be that shocked by the replicator when they see that. So a bit, it does raise a few more questions about what's going on with these characters and where they come from. We do get history on Dal this week. See what I've done there? It was a great segue. Leave a like and subscribe as well. So yeah, Dal, not the most beloved character. I'm really enjoying this show, but the dickishness of Dal has been letting it down. I have said it a few times. And oh no, I'm not the only one. I watch other reviews and listen to podcasts as well. I'm a cool guy. They receive a distress call and decide to investigate. And there's a little nod to the phage, a few more Easter eggs, not as heavy as it was last week. I still think Star Trek's been a little too much self-referential since New Trek started. It's got to branch out on its own and create its own canon stuff. I mean, we are going to get more of this, but is it going to tie over into the live action stuff? I highly doubt it. But then again, that's kind of refreshing if it is on its own. And Dal recognises the person sending the distress call straight away, and it's a Ferengi, which again, more questions. How did this Ferengi get out there? And it's not only a Ferengi, it's a Ferengi with their own full Marauder class Ferengi ship. I think that's what they were called, or that was the name of the class of the ship in the show. I'm going to find out and I'll stick it up in the edit, so if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and if I'm right, I'm right. But yeah, how did this ship get there? How did the Ferengi get there? Because the way that Dal's talking, they were together for quite a while. Dal says that he was raised by this Ferengi, who's also female, by the way, so we know that society's progressed a little bit since we last seen them in Deep Space Nine, but I was hoping for a bit more backstory than we got here. So the Ferengi does recognise that the ship is Federation, but we don't really see too much of the ship other than where Dal used to live, which was under the engine room. And there's also another Easter egg in there in the form of a Klingon cloaking device, which seems to be the exact model that Quark stole from Deep Space Nine episode The Emperor's New Cloak. And the crew realise it's a cloak and want to get their hands on it because they're still on the run from the Diviner, but it needs a sort of essential part or power source that they don't have. So with it being an episode with Ferengi, they decide to do a trade. The Ferengi need something that's on an alien planet to pay off a debt, which is some sort of crystal. And it reminded me of the Voyager episode where Neelix meets that other Talaxian on the space station near the Necrod Expanse and he gets involved in a scam. It's kind of a familiar beat like that. So it is a bit... no, I wouldn't say classic Trek. Is Voyager from 20 years ago classic Trek? I don't know. If you think it is, let me know in the comments below. But it certainly did have a distinct Star Trek beat to it. A lot of people have been saying the last few episodes of Discovery are also having sort of old Star Trek beats, and I completely agree with that, and I think this is a great sign. And I look forward to seeing it in other Star Trek shows that are coming up as well. The planet that they have to go to isn't warp capable, so Janeway has to brief them on what the Prime Directive is and what it's all about. So I'm sure I've said this in my earlier videos, but it seems that in every episode they're learning more about what it is to live in the Federation. So I don't know what they're setting up with this, if it's just going to be their ideals, or they are eventually going to reach the Alpha Quadrant or reach some sort of Starfleet or Federation outpost. But once they land the ship on the planet, which looks cool and does look very much like when Voyager was landed in Basics, that two-parter from the second and third season, the aliens that live there are pretty unique, and it really reminded me a little bit of Dune with the whole resonating sand thing. I thought it did look pretty cool. And again, the animation in this season has been spot on. I've loved it from start to finish. But with it also being a Ferengi episode, there's a twist, and the crystals are essential to how this species communicates on the planet. So the trade goes about as well as you think it would once this was found out, and the Ferengi tries to make a run out and steal the crystals, and during this she reveals to Dal that she's the one that sold them in the mine where we first met him. So we're still not getting too much backstory on him, or it's getting drip fed. In my opinion, it is a little bit slow, but as always we're going to have to wait and see. But back on the ship, Janeway is re-watching the footage from last week, which is her, well, as far as we know, final moments before she had her memory wiped on the ship and the captain was lost. And we find out that the Diviner seems to be connected to what initially happened to the ship before Janeway lost her memory. I can't see any real Easter eggs here. The only question I have is Chakotay's uniform is noticeably different, and also how long was that ship on the planet? I said it in the first review, or I think it was my first question that I had when I done a predictions video, that how long had this ship been there and where are the crew? Because they can't bring Chakotay back, because if they bring him back he's going to want the ship and take it from the main characters. They're not going to bring him onto the ship as a main character, because I don't think Robert Beltran would want to do it, and they're not going to kill Chakotay on screen. So where the hell are the crew and Chakotay? Now, it could be that this is an alternative universe kind of thing, because again, Chakotay's Starfleet uniform didn't really look anything like we've seen before on screen, but this is an unspecified, or not an unspecified, but an unseen sort of point in Star Trek history, so it could be a change. We don't know, or it could also be time travel as well, because the ship does seem to be very futuristic, and I don't think Chakotay would want to be going straight back to the Delta Quadrant after he'd just been there for 7 years, so some time must have passed for him to sort of, you know, settle a life back on Earth, or catch up with people and then go back out. So again, we do get some answers in this show, but more questions, and that's the only sort of complaint that I have. I think this was much better than last week's episode, although, you know, you've got to love those holograms, although I think Star Trek has been, again, relying on self-references and old Easter eggs too much. It should be driving the plot forward. I did really like last week's episode, but this week was another step up. But what do you think's going on with Chakotay? What do you think's happened to the crew? And do you think it's an alternative universe? It could be set in the JJ verse. You don't know. Imagine that. The fandom's always going to be divided, so who cares? As always, I'm Al, this has been The Geek in Review. You can follow me on Twitter at The Geeks Reviews. If you've made it this far, please leave a like in the video and subscribe to the channel.